Well, thank you so much for the kind introduction. Thanks everyone for being here. I know there's a lot going on in everyone's minds. There's a lot of things you could be doing, and taking an hour out of your day to really think about how you can put some frameworks around uncertainty, especially for something that can be really frustrating and feel very depressing, like a job search. I'm really going to try and keep things short, sweet, and to the point. I encourage everyone to ask questions. Don't be shy. I hope that during this really brief talk, I'm really emphasizing this fact, the fact that when you take action, you change the situation around you, even when things feel really crazy and chaotic. There are ways to take some control back from the environment around you, and I want to at least give you a way to think about and strategize within these kinds of things that you feel are completely out of your control. So today, my talk to you guys is called Taking Control of Your Job Search, Charting a Way Forward in Uncertain Times. All right, so let's get started. This might be how a lot of you feel about your career path, about the road ahead for the rest of the year, or maybe even into next year. And so when you feel really lost, when you feel like there's no way forward, what are you supposed to do, right? And I really wanted to take some lessons from different frameworks that people use to deal with uncertainty. Certainly, you and I are not the only individuals who are struggling and grappling with the unknown. So, one of the main points that I really want to convey is that although it's a little bit ironic, the more uncertain your situation is, the less uncertain you actually can be if you want to be effective at moving yourself forward, right? So the problem with crises, like what we all find ourselves in today, is that it seems like it's very difficult to prepare for something like this. However, we can take a book out of emergency management, right? There are entire studies on how do you deal with emergencies or how do you deal with crises. First thing is prevention and risk mitigation. Now, each of us may be at different points along this process ourselves, right? When it comes to thinking about where my future is going, what kind of jobs am I going to be looking for? However, keeping this larger process in mind might help you feel a little bit less out of control, just to know where you stand, right? So the first thing you have to know is, what are your accurate assumptions, or what are your assumptions today about what the risks are for you and what you can do that's in your control, right? And actually, I bolded accurate assumptions here because I think, especially when it comes to thinking about opportunities for careers that we can take out of academia, we may not have accurate assumptions. We have a lot of assumptions. It's really important to go and figure out if those assumptions are real. Then we have to prepare, right? So a lot of us might be at this stage, figuring out, how am I supposed to prepare for this? And a lot of it is truly just taking action. Some of us might be between stage 2 and 3, but you'll find that the more you take action, the more you're actually going out there, looking at job postings, talking to people, taking the opportunity to learn from others to better yourself. It's actually a really virtuous cycle between sort of 2, 3, and 4, recovery, which is figuring out what do you need to do to become productive and healthy when the circumstances around you change. All of us are at some level here, both in terms of our professional development, as well as perhaps just dealing with the current pandemic situation in our lives and how it's impacting us. Number 5 is one that I think is really important for all of us to keep in mind. Where we are today has very little to do with what we do tomorrow. But what happens to us a year from now might actually really depend on what we do tomorrow. So you're always wanting to think ahead. And again, when we are in academia, it may not be the most forward-looking environment when it comes to our personal desires for our careers. So that's why it's really important that you do take action to put yourself in those kinds of environments, like today. So hope for the best, plan for the worst. There's really very little else that we can really think about. And so this should make sense to everyone. It works for real life sudden emergencies. It works for a longer term situation like your job hunt and your future career development. All right, so we're all researchers. I know there are people here from all different backgrounds, humanities, STEM, different types of research projects. However, I think everyone should be quite familiar with the research or scientific method, right? Many of us do not, however, apply this to our life for whatever reason, right? Maybe we think it's only going to apply to the projects that we are being paid to do right now, or perhaps not being paid to do, depending on your situation. I really encourage you to think about your job hunt like a research project. It has exactly the same issues within the unknowns, and you can take the same kinds of actions. So do a literature search, make a hypothesis, run your experiments, and get the data. I can't tell you how many times I talk to PhDs who are frustrated about their job hunt, and I ask them, well, what have you done? Have you looked at job postings? Have you tried applying? Have you sent your materials to someone for feedback? And a lot of times the answer is no, they haven't done any of that, right? They have just been thinking themselves into a corner in their lab or at home. That does not help you, right? It doesn't help you with a research project, and it doesn't help you with a job. So you need to get the data, to put yourself out there, to accept that you have to analyze the data, you have to tweak your hypothesis, it's a cycle, right? You have to be able to know what you modify next time in order to do better, right? So we don't like doing this simply because it sucks to get rejected, right? And we tend to want to have more control and more knowledge to know, hey, how can I hit the nail on the head the first time? I'm here to tell you that that's pretty much impossible, right? We are unique people. We are in different environments and situations. You can't figure out how to improve your results until you get some data first. So we really need to take heart in the fact that failure is expected, just like in research. And if you don't fail first, you are stopping yourself from moving forward towards success. So I'm going to jump right into, well, okay, fine. I know all of this process, right? I have protocols I can follow when it comes to doing a new research project or proposing a new direction of a paper. But what about my job hunt, right? Where am I going? What is even out there? How do I figure that out, right? So let's just look at our available options from kind of the 10,000 foot perspective, and really just simplifying it down for ourselves, right? Because sometimes we may overcomplicate and overthink things. There are really only 3 different types of employment entities out there that if you're wanting to leave academia, there's only these options for you, right? For-profit entities, nonprofit entities, and government entities, right? If you think about any dream place you'd like to work, they're gonna fall into one of these categories. Some of them may be an interesting hybrid, or perhaps they partner very closely with these different kinds of entities. But really, there's not that many different types of employers out there, right? So I don't care if you're a scientist studying bacteria. I don't care if you are an English PhD and you're writing about something historical or about literature. All of us have the same categories of options available for us going forward. So how do we manage to get our way into these kinds of environments, right? That might be the next question. How am I supposed to break in when the key that I hold coming out of academia is prowess in research, right? So many of us will be very familiar with what the motivations are to be successful in a research environment, right? Typically, inside academia, novelty is king, right? You can't do a thesis, you can't get a PhD if what you're proposing has been done before, right? Typically, you're really trying to discover new things. You are adding new information to a body of knowledge. You are really pursuing and being rewarded by owning something new and doing something new, talking about something new. So what about outside academia, right? The way that we're successful in getting a job is making sure that our priorities match those of the people that we are trying to attract. So what about outside academia? Really think about your audience. This is going to be the key to your success no matter what you are doing. So since we're talking about the job hunt, let's find out what your audience needs, right? How do you get a job? Well, you have to be able to demonstrate how you create value for your audience. You have to lower the risk for your audience to select you out of that huge pile of resumes or that list of people that are coming in for a Zoom interview these days. And then you have to be able to, again, convince them that you're going to deliver value for them, right? You're going to deliver the value that they need better than anyone else who is competing with you for the job. And believe it or not, having a research background can very well equip you to do these three things, right? And even if you take nothing else away from today's discussion, think about the value for your audience. You know, write that down, put it on a sticky note, stick it on your laptop screen when you feel frustrated, because this is going to always point you in a direction that is productive. So, what value can you provide for these three categories of employers? If we can more specifically pin those down, right, you may feel a little bit more in control in terms of, well, if I know this dream employer needs this, I can work towards that, right? Like, give me a goal and I can figure out how to get there. That's often how we treat research, right? You're like, oh, I need to figure out this unknown, but the known is how you get there through the process. So we'll just take for-profits, right? Could be a startup company, it could be a Fortune 500, it doesn't really matter. They all need to do these types of things, these value add activities, right? If you're a for-profit entity, you have to develop some type of a product or service that's valuable to someone, right? You need to get that to your customers or your clients. You have to find new people to serve if you want to stay alive and if you want to grow. You have to recruit great people to your organization in order to accomplish all of this stuff. You have to work with others, ideally, right? So just like in any type of team-based project, each person is going to not be able to accomplish as much as a group can. Same thing with an organization. You have to make some money, right? Because if you want to pay people, where is that money coming from? It's coming from the value they deliver to others. And ideally, every organization tries to maintain a healthy work environment so that everyone can be productive and happy, right? There are many other things that need to be accomplished within a for-profit entity to stay alive and to do a really good job of developing and delivering their products and services. But these are some of the major ones, right? And again, substitute any for-profit entity into this scenario, you can answer those questions, right? What their product is, what their service is, who their customers are, how they probably go out and find new customers and new employees, what kind of partnerships they might have, how they're making money, their business model, and what they might be doing internally to make sure that their workforce is doing well. Now, how about nonprofit entities and government entities? Well, I'm pleased to tell you that they're not all that different, right? So perhaps instead of developing a product and a service, perhaps they're developing a mission or a program, right? But guess what? Everything else is pretty much the same, right? Because if you have something of value, right? If I'm a museum, if I'm a local federal agency, and I've got something really great to serve my community of interest, it doesn't matter if you can't get out there and get in touch with your community, right? Find new people to come and work for you, find new people to serve, right? Manage people that you work with to accomplish your missions and programs. You still need money to function. And again, ideally, everyone wants to work in a place that treats them well. So the nice thing about trying to plan where you might try to aim yourself in a job hunt is, again, thinking about the audience and then realizing, one, your audience is somewhat limited, right? Not in a bad way, but in a way where you won't get overwhelmed. There's only a few different categories. within those categories, they all have similar requirements and needs, which means that if you can identify the main value that you can deliver, well, then you should have a range of targets that you can deliver this value for, right, to. So we can certainly talk in more detail about specifics. If you have, say, again, a dream job or a type of role that you'd really like to play, and you're trying to figure out where that would fit, right? Like what kind of organization, what type of, what sector of society that might be in, what kind of role that could look like, what job titles that might come with, and then figuring out, okay, well then, how do I move myself in that direction? But hopefully this helps to break things down in a way that doesn't get super overwhelming. And right now, since we are in a time of uncertainty, one of the main issues that every single organization out there, unsurprisingly, is going to be concerned about is their funding, right? So I've bolded that here because, again, this is going to go across all sectors of society, right? When our economy starts slowing down, that means cash flow and ways to make profits or get funding, they're going to be impacted very heavily and right away. And what that means is a lot of these organizations that we want to get hired into are going to be doing their own emergency management, right? So trying to figure out what are the risks to their business, to staying alive, or to say a nonprofit program. Which ones might they have to cut for now in order to keep everyone else alive, right? Understanding that many of the actions that might seem really depressing from our perspective, like trying to get a job and realizing, oh my gosh, well, they froze hiring. Or I really wanted to work in this program and man, they cut it, right? Because of the current situation. But really thinking about, okay, well, that was my target. They had to do X, again, freeze hiring, cut the program funding. What else can I provide, right? Or where else might I be able to find an organization who would need something similar? And perhaps that same value that this organization thought, okay, it's not essential, I cut it, but could be essential for this organization, right? So thinking again about the value that you represent, that you can provide someone, and then being able to be more strategic about seeking out where you can deliver that value will, I think, do a lot in helping you feel, again, a little bit more in control of how you spend your time and how you are looking for opportunities. So one thing that I know is very common among all of us coming out of academia is we might be afraid that, well, if I make a decision that's incorrect, right, I've kind of doomed myself to a career where I'm going to hate my life and I'm never going to be happy and be able to make the impact I want. What I want to encourage you to think about yourself as, rather than climbing a ladder, which might be how we envision academia, right? So you kind of take one rung at a time and it's very straightforward. You kind of move ahead and you progress your career. What about outside academia? Well, I want to think of really think about yourself as having a handful of puzzle pieces, right? That's kind of what you are when you're going on the job market outside of academia, and actually even within academia. But since we're talking about sort of a broader job hunt, you have a lot of different qualities, a lot of different so-called transferable skills, right? We hear about transferable skills a lot when we think about careers, but the way to think about them in perhaps a more tangible way is you have different puzzle pieces. These puzzle pieces are all part of who you are as an individual. And you might be able to take one puzzle piece and kind of attach yourself to one puzzle, but you might have other puzzle pieces that allow you to attach to other puzzles. And the idea here is you're not really going to make a terrible choice by selecting one to go after. Because as soon as you join someone else's puzzle, you actually start acquiring and accumulating new puzzle pieces. And those are going to help you attach to new missions, seek other types of organizations in the future. So the goal here, when you're thinking about how to move forward, or say fighting your fear of moving forward, is thinking about all the new puzzle pieces you're going to be accumulating as soon as you make a new step, because that's pretty much guaranteed for all of us. So what do we have today in our pocket as far as our existing puzzle pieces coming out of academia? Well, you have your hard skills, right? So I'm making a very generalized kind of fuzzy term for this just so it's easy to talk about. But what I mean by your hard skills could be very specific, very technical, or very specialized niche knowledge. All of us are going to have this, right? Depending on where your field is, what you've been studying, what you've been writing about, who you've been talking to, right? This gives you a very specific pile of puzzle pieces in your pocket that you're going to combine with the next one, which we'll talk about in a moment. But for example, right, depending on who you are and what you've been studying in your research, right, it could be anything from the role of sausage hedgehog in, vertebrate development. It could be dealing with optimization problems in machine learning. You could be looking at, depression and different things that change that. You could be looking at epidemiological questions. You could be studying historical things. You could be looking at literature. It doesn't matter. From every one of these types of research projects, I can already start picking out specific puzzle pieces, if you will, right? So let's take, I don't know, the epidemiology of COVID-19, right? So obviously there's going to be some specific skills or knowledge or context that you have that other people will not. So for example, for this person, they might have been really, ingrained in understanding how federal prison systems work, right? So again, that's a puzzle piece right there. That means that perhaps in jobs where they want someone with a deep understanding of prison systems, guess what? Your puzzle piece is going to be a better fit than someone else's. That's one thing you have in your pocket. Again, epidemiology, that comes with a whole different set of puzzle pieces, right? So different ways to analyze data, different statistical methods, just knowledge of epidemiological processes in general. Everything that you're doing today, every title of your talk that you've given, the title of your thesis, the papers that you're reading, you should be able to pick out those specific, say, hard skills or specific specialized niche knowledge or expertise. And you should be aware of what those things are, because again, each one of those may allow you to connect with an employer or a particular space better than someone else. Then, of course, that's not all that you have as an individual. You have you, right? And I think a lot of us may discount this more than we should. You should be thinking about, well, what do I bring to the table as an individual? It's not just what you've been learning or what you've been studying or what you've been writing. It's also your personal skills. So these are your personality traits, the way you like to work, the life experiences that you've had, the contexts in understanding problems, your community networks. Believe it or not, some jobs will hire you because you know the right people, right? That is one of those things that's on your side. So you should be strategic on how you use them. And we talk again about these kinds of soft skills. So how you engage with other people, how you influence them, can you communicate well with them? And this is appropriate both inside and outside academia. Anyone who has competed for faculty positions should also know that it's not just what you've been studying, it's also how well you relate to your future colleagues, how well you get along with other people, and perhaps can impact and help other people with their skills and with their goals. So all of us actually have a bunch of these things going forward into this crazy employment space. So each of us is kind of this different collection of puzzle pieces, these skills, this knowledge, these transferable qualities about ourselves. And this is kind of the picture that we all have to deal with, right? So this might be you, this might be me, this might be other people who are competing on the job market with their own collection of unique pieces that they're offering to them, right? So again, the different categories of employers, their different specific needs. And this is actually, I think, a very apt way to illustrate the problem that they have, right? They have a network, generally speaking, of employees already. They have this sort of partially completed puzzle as is. So they're really looking for a specific piece to fit into a specific role that they need help with. And that's why when we talk about, resumes, cover letters, interviewing, networking, all of those things are really about how do you determine what are the shapes of their gaps and where are you in that space, right? And so understanding yourself is really important because you need to figure out, okay, what are the pieces I've got? Where might they be able to fit? That's the first thing you have to figure out. And then after that, you also need to think about them. Where are you trying to fit yourself into, right? So the next few slides are just ways to kind of turn the tables, switch your mindset, and really think about the other side. You know, how do I become a top player when it comes to the game of finding a job, right? And as a person who has sat on hiring panels in the past, you know, it's such a simple thing, but frustrating as well, because you're looking for someone who's like, oh, you know, I'd really like to find someone who has these skills and who could help us with this. And you know, on both sides, it's actually not crazy to think about meeting in the middle somewhere. And for us, looking for opportunities in this crazy world, we need to know what they need, right? So the things that people are looking for when they're trying to find a good candidate, there's really only three things that either can be done by you or that they're relying on to find someone that they want to hire. So they're looking, again, if we think back to that puzzle picture, of someone who can fit that space, right? What they think they need. So what we can do as job hunters is to try and figure out, well, what are those exact skill sets that they're looking for to become qualified, right? And of course, there's going to be caveats to this. Sometimes employers don't actually know what they need or don't actually know who they're looking for. So job postings may not be the most reliable way even for them to find people. However, this is a tactic that we can use, right? Figure out, okay, what do they need and how can I become that? The second one is figuring out, what have I done that's close enough to what they're looking for, that I can convince them, you know what, I can do this. Like, don't worry about it. Like, even though it may not be, you know, A, I've done B, and B is really close to A. So I can still fulfill this role for you. And, you know, here's why I'm the best candidate for you. So that's kind of the goal of transferable skill sets. Or number three, which we often may hear about on the job hunt, which sounds really frustrating, but happens all the time, is the benefit of the doubt on a personal level. AKA, I knew someone and they knew that I could do this, so they said, okay, let's give you a try, right? Number three was always one of the most frustrating things for me to hear about. So I'm like, well, how do I get that, you know, benefit of the doubt on a personal level? Well, that's networking, right? So essentially, these three things are ways that you can help yourself become more competitive. The first one is basically looking at the puzzle pieces in your pocket already and figuring out, where might this fit as is without me having to do extra work. For some of us, there might be a lot of opportunities. For others, we might not see a lot of opportunities. Actually, myself, I was one of those people. Neuroscience doesn't have a lot of puzzle pieces open for me. That meant I needed to work on 2 and 3 more aggressively. It meant that, okay, no one cares that I played with mice in my PhD. What else do they care about that I have done? Where else can I put those skill sets to use for an open position somewhere else? And then, of course, 3, the more people that I know and the more people who know me, the bigger the chance that someone's going to say, you know what, I like you. I can see what you can do. Why don't we give this a try? And so again, just kind of emphasizing one more time that there are fears on the other side. The best thing we can do for ourselves is to lower those fears for you, lower the risk. So what are the fears? They're pretty simple. They're afraid that you don't actually know what to do. You don't actually know how to do the technical things that they would like you to do in that role. They're also the ones in red, kind of the things that they might fear about, you know, you beyond just the technical things. So can you play with others? You know, are you going to be interested in this job and growing with their team? Are you going to be dependable and be able to hit timelines and deadlines? And then the fact that they have other people to choose from, right? So this is kind of what it looks like from their side. So what can we use to kind of balance this equation? Well, you have to be able to show evidence of your technical skills in a way they understand. You have to be able to show that you can get along with others, that you do have a growth path that you're interested in and passionate about that fits with them, that you know, have evidence of hitting timelines and deadlines. Just saying it is not going to be as impactful, right? And then the option of other candidates, well, again, that networking comes right in. If you knew someone on the team, if you reached out and you know, learned from someone, then they might think of you first over other candidates. So that's what we can do on our side. So, you know, I'm kind of reaching the end of the lecture part here, and I'm looking forward to interacting more, you know, in the Q&A, but really think about the business problem you're going to solve. And I put it in quotes because, again, not all of us are going to want to go into a for-profit business, but for-profit businesses operate the fastest, typically. They have a lot of the highest stakes, aka if they can't make money, everyone's going to be out of a job. So if you think about ways in a business problem format, you will be well equipped to think about other issues in these other sectors. So understanding your value in a job, try to answer these questions, right? What problem are you solving for them? What are you producing? What's your product? Is it information? Is it knowledge? Is it good relationships? Those are all important products that you are producing in that role. And then who are you doing it for? What did they need? Why do they want someone to do this, right? Being able to understand these questions and answers are going to help you, again, put some control back into this whole kind of chaotic situation. And really think about tangibility, right? Like what can you show that proves you can do it? What is the impact that you made? Because if you don't tell someone, they're not going to know that about you, right? And then be specific to the problems that they are facing. So just throwing this out here real quick, but you know, if you come across an opportunity you're really excited about, one quick way to kind of see, okay, is this going to be something that I should just send an application out for now, or is this something that I could do something quickly to get even better chances when I send out my application? You can look at a technical fit of your skills, again, the sort of more technical puzzle pieces you have, as well as, again, those personal cultural aspects that you might bring to the table. And you can think about, okay, where do I fit on this plot, right? Do I understand what they do? Do I know their work culture? Do I understand, you know, the customers and the clients they're talking to? Do I have an understanding of how they work? And then on top of that, can I actually do many of the things that they asked for in the job posting? If so, you'll have kind of excellent technical and cultural fit. So this should be one of your top priorities when applying for the positions, as well as networking. And then, you know, you should be able to start getting a sense as you start talking to people, looking at the job postings out there, evaluating where you fit, how this kind of pans out, right? And this might help you, again, put priorities into like where you're going to focus first. So find your lowest hanging fruit, right? Make sure you're not reaching for the moon and then getting depressed because you can't reach it, right? Go step by step. So dig out all of your skills, your expertise, your personal strengths, your contextual knowledge, like we were mentioning before. Figure out who would care about this, right? And again, I didn't do this as a grad student because I really wasn't thinking about my audience. I was just thinking about myself. So very few actual employers cared about my specific technical skills. Well, guess what? It's good to know that, because if I didn't do a lot of other stuff on the side, I had very few puzzle pieces to fit into, right? Whereas luckily I did other things, and that provided me with more puzzle pieces that I could, you know, try and match with. And then figure out what the gaps are, right? If you know where you are, you know where they are, you can figure out, okay, well, is this something that I have to spend a lot of time trying to reach, or is this something that I just need a little bit of effort and then I could reach, right? Know that, and that way, again, you can put a plan into place about what you attack first. Then you build connections and you build skills to bridge the gaps. And then you look broadly and you look all the time. All the time. You don't know who's going to have an opportunity pop up tomorrow that could be a perfect fit for you, right? So cast your net wide and often, and try your best to stay motivated and positive, because when you get that unexpected opportunity, you want to be pumped and ready to go, right? You don't want to be kind of digging yourself out from the dumps. And so, you know, I really want to kind of end with the idea that the workplace is not a ladder outside of academia. It's more like this. It's, if you start here, you start growing these new arms, or, if you're here, you start, understanding how pieces of the workplace fit together. And then you'll be able to insert yourself into other career paths. You're going to be able to make, pivots, as they call it in business lingo. But, if you start here and you don't kind of branch out and reach out, you're never going to be able to jump here or here or here, right? So you want to work on that. You want to give yourself the opportunity to branch out. Every new opportunity that comes is going to be developed by the new risks and the new opportunities that you take. Really quick, a lot of people ask questions like, do I need more school? Do I need more training? Just make sure you can figure out if you're doing it for you or if you're doing it because you think people want it, right? So make sure it fits your goals. Make sure it's a clear advantage or a requirement for where you want to go. Again, ask the question, does it lower the risk for hiring you? Does it actually matter? Start talking to people and figure that out. Does it provide, replace, or stand in for hands-on experience? That matters a lot, right? Can you do the same thing in a different project on your own without paying money or spending 3 years or whatever it is? Make sure that the return on investment is worth it if you're considering more education to help you get where you want to go. So SWOT analysis, you can just write this down, you can Google it later. It's just another framework to help you perhaps take control of where you are today on the job market. So figuring out your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. And again, it is very contextual, depends on where you want to go and who you're aiming for. But it might help you, again, put some order into your life and how you think about where you want to go. So I just wanted to end with an inspirational note. It is your life. It is your choice where you want to take your PhD. The reason that my project is called Free the PhD is because I want you to free yourself from the feeling that you have to do X because of your degree. You don't. You're a free person. Do what you want. And I put down there a little quote from a kind of idiom in Chinese, which basically means as long as there's kind of green forests around, you're never going to want for firewood. In other words, where there's life, there's hope, right? So if you really want to go in a direction and you're holding yourself back because you're afraid what other people would think, forget them. Don't worry about them, right? When you are successful and you love where you are, everything's going to be worth it. All right, so hopefully I didn't take too much of our remaining time talking through this, but I hope that it was a useful framework for you. The things that I talk about are, I think, very relevant to any direction you want to go. And at the end of the day, you're driving your own ship. You're gonna have to figure out where you want to point yourself. But after that, the processes are not that different. So, I welcome any questions, any points, any things that you want to discuss with me while in our remaining time.
Baby, thank you so much. You did a fantastic job of sort of reframing the job search when things are uncertain. We have a lot of questions actually in the chat box.
Okay.
You just mentioned in the previous slide, threats, identifying threats. So someone asked, what are examples of those threats?
Sure. So do they have a specific, okay, so maybe it's hard to have a conversation, I guess, by text, but so the SWOT analysis is usually used in a business context when there's a specific problem or, again, unknown ahead of you. So I don't know. Well, so let's just say for one of us, right? Like, let's say I'll do it for myself, right? I was a neuroscience graduate student. I did a lot of research that has very little real world application, unfortunately. So if I was going to do a SWOT analysis on myself, right, my threats would be the fact that there are no jobs that required my skill sets, right? So that's a threat to my goal. You have to figure out what you're doing a SWOT analysis for. So for me, it might be, okay, well, how do I match up to the job market as a job candidate? Well, a threat's going to be the fact that there's not a lot of drugs, therapies, services that require my background, right? That's a threat to me getting a job. So if you don't get that information, if you're not honest with yourself about the fact that maybe there are not very many jobs, right, that care about my technical skills, well, then it's time for me to focus on other things that I offer, right? And so for me, again, I happen to do writing, leadership, other things that gave me other puzzle pieces to fit into different types of environments or to carry me into different places.
Thank you. Could you discuss some of the most common negative assumptions firms are hiring, firms that hire professionals have about PhDs? What are some?
Oh, yes, absolutely. All right, so let's talk about biases real quick. And again, the reason we do this is because if we know the biases, we can fight the biases, right? We can come right away and take those biases off the table. So that would be the goal. So first of all, PhDs have no, so again, these are stereotypes, right? We know this is not true. But first of all, they don't have a sense of urgency, right? A lot of us might understand why. It's because like our projects can take years, right? Because it literally can take years. It's not our fault per se. But when you're talking to an employer that operates under tight timelines, right? Their assumption is that, oh, you know, you've been doing a research project for 5 years. They're like, well, my company would go under in 6 months if we can't get this done, right? So how do you deal with that bias? Work on projects that have tight timelines, right? So it doesn't have to be in academia. Go write an article that needs to be due in a week, right? Go work with a volunteer organization that holds, I don't know, weekly events, right? You put yourself in charge of things that have timelines. That should go on your resume then, right? That's where these things come and help you. Again, if you're lacking in the sort of time deadline pieces, put more things on there that add those pieces. So deadlines, working well with others, right? Again, many of us are isolated in academia, not necessarily because we want to be, but that's just because that's the environment. So you come in with a PhD, you know, into a team-based role, and they're like, oh my God, you're going to be really egotistical, you're going to be really stubborn, you're only going to care about what you want to do. I can't work with someone like that. So again, how do you fight that bias? Do things on a team, right? So again, it doesn't have to be in academia, but go find, you know, a running group, go organize a conference, right? This is why people tell you, oh, you know, leadership opportunities. It's more than just the leadership. It actually gives you so many other ways to fight these biases. So again, sort of team-based situations, provide evidence that you can do it. Another thing is kind of true, but so again, it's just how practical are you, right? So are you all theoretical? Are you only just head in the clouds, kind of theorizing away, which doesn't help us achieve our goals? So again, that's why I talked a lot about what are their needs. Figure them out succinctly, specifically. Do they need you to write a blog? Do they need you to, you know, program whatever algorithm in a set amount of time for a certain audience? Figure out what they actually need, figure out how you can demonstrate you can do that too, right? I would say those are some of the biggest ones. Time, teams, kind of practical impact. Maybe the last one would be like funding, or just understanding that everyone has funding limitations. Kind of money, the fact that we don't deal with money in academia, and we're like sometimes really weird about dealing with money in academia. So don't be one of those people, right? Make sure that you understand the budget limitations that someone might have and help them deal with those. That's going to help you a lot.
Thanks. This is a very good question. A lot of students and postdocs have been intending to go into academic world, but when funding falls short and the economy collapses, how do I balance finding a position that I'm happy with versus finding a job for the sake of getting a paycheck as soon as possible?
Sure. I think that's a very practical question that we're all going to be facing, especially if we have been spending most of our time, you know, thinking about just one option for ourselves. So, you know, I'm a very practical person. I think that you have to take care of yourself first, right? So I had mentioned before, you know, where there's life, there's hope. Make sure you first take care of your life, right? In order to keep the hope alive. So if you're staring down like a 2-month deadline before your funding runs out, you might want to be thinking about where your paycheck's going to be coming from, right? It's not the most inspirational message, but you need to think about yourself, right? And I've seen people who may let the ideal perhaps take too much control over their behavior and how they spend their time, right? If you have a paycheck, if you have a roof over your head, you at least then have the mental space and capacity to strategize about how you're going to get yourself to a place that you like, right? If you are really, 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 really only focused on moving ahead and ignoring the things that you really need in life, how are you going to be in a position to help yourself, right? I don't see how that's going to be useful. So I think it's possible to look for a paycheck, sort of just the paycheck, kind of assuming that it has no soul to it in terms of what you like, as well as looking for a job that you're interested in. So for example, if you're on the faculty path, right, you should be doing some of the same things we talked about. You should be looking at what the job market looks like both within academia and outside academia, right? You, again, figure out what puzzle pieces do I have today? Where are the places they could go, both within academia and external to academia? Can you pursue them at the same time? Probably, because you're going to be thinking about, again, doing the self-introspection, figuring out what you come with, and then where they could potentially go. And then you could be networking with people, for example, in a university you want to join on Monday, and then you could be sending out messages on LinkedIn to people working in positions that you might like outside of academia and talking to them on Wednesday. Like, it doesn't have to be one or the other. In fact, you might be more efficient by looking at kind of inside and outside at the same time, and then doing the same activities, but just aimed at different people, right? So just giving yourself as many opportunities to win as possible. I think one of the things that often comes up was like, oh, what if I get a job and, I'm not ready for it, or I get an offer and it's not what I want. And I'm like, well, don't you wish you were in that position? It's not real until you have an offer in your hand. Do not take any opportunities off the table for yourself. Why would you do that? Make it your option to reject them, right? But in order to do that, you need to go out there and start. You need to continue pushing, right?
Vanya, a question for those that are applying currently but dealing with a lot of rejection. How do you sort of deal with the rejection, but also how do you get feedback from, say, a recruiter or the company to tell you what you did or didn't do wrong? That was a question from the audience as well.
Sure. So yeah, rejection sucks. No one likes rejection. We often don't do things because we fear rejection. Kudos to you for applying. I think that's step number one, putting yourself out there. If you're getting rejections, I would say there's kind of trying to diagnose the problem. If I want to put it in a very broad framework, right? There's two general reasons for rejection. One is actually the most common. They didn't think your piece fit what they needed, right? That could be actually true in the sense that you actually don't fit right now, or they perceive you to not fit, right? Operationally, that results in the same thing for us, which is rejection. What's important though is to diagnose, well, is it true, right? Are you actually not a good fit? And you just need to either change the way you phrase things on your resume, or are you actually not a good fit, right? So some people might want to jump into, example, MSL for people who are in the life science space, or project management or program manager, right? Actually, that these two titles go for everyone. Often we're going to get rejected for these types of positions right off the bat if we don't have some specific qualities or traits right away. MSLs, typically, you need to have a physician network of some kind. That's kind of a prerequisite. So if we don't have that coming in, we're kind of missing a really big piece of that puzzle. Other people might have it. You might get rejected over and over if you don't work on that clinician network, for example, right? But you need to determine, was that a key thing that was missing? For things like program management or project management, again, if you're applying for those kinds of jobs and you keep getting rejected, one of the main reasons is actually that bias, that we don't know how to work with teams. And not only that, we don't understand how the team dynamic works. So how can you manage a project within a team or between teams, right? So some of these biases, I would actually say, having worked now, I understand where they're coming from. It is very difficult to learn how to manage a team, work within a team. And if you don't know how the work context operates, you will be at a disadvantage compared to other people. So if you really want to get into project management as a career path, you may need to start as an individual contributor within those teams first in order to get that experience, add that, arm to your puzzle piece, or add more pieces to your hand. That way, then when you apply again, for example, you might be able to be more successful, right? So it's not that it's impossible. It's simply that you do need to take a more critical look, objective look at if you are a good fit or not. And where you can get that information from is your network. So asking people who are in those jobs, look at your resume and tell you honestly, look, I think maybe this might be 2 steps from you. Let's, maybe you want to consider this first, or here are some activities you could do to help you acquire those things that might be between you and where you want to go, right? So your network, informational interviewing, that's what that's for, is to get feedback when you can't get it from the hiring manager or the recruiters for either legal or just, laziness reasons. Yeah.
So I want to ask a question on behalf of international students. How does
Mm-hmm.
one prepare for a possible suspension in visa, OPT? What advice would you have for an international student sort of navigating these uncertain times?
Yeah, I feel so bad for all of our colleagues who are international people. I think it's such a shame that we have to put that as the first concern in our futures. But again, it is a reality, right? I unfortunately am not an immigration lawyer, so I can't give specific advice. But I will say I've seen, people who have been successful when they do have to, for example, return home because of visa issues, because they prepared for it, right? So I really think it comes back to that philosophy. We don't like to think about worst case scenarios. It sucks. It's depressing. However, the way you take control in those situations is preparing for those worst case scenarios. What if you don't get that visa? What if you can't find someone to sponsor you? Have you at least taken a few steps to ensure a soft landing for yourself, right? Have you taken a plan C preparedness plan, right? Have you started talking to people back home and figuring out, okay, well, what can I do? Just putting together a little contingency plan for yourself can be very helpful. I would also say if you have not sought out professional help for this, there are some things worth spending a little time and maybe even money on. And sometimes something like a visa issue might be worth it. And again, I don't know, perhaps at Hopkins, you also have people that you can reach out to, resources who know what they're talking about and can give you specific advice that helps you prepare.
I know you have a work call exactly at 12, so I'm going to ask the last 2 questions. How far in advance should we start searching and applying for jobs? One concern is that things are so uncertain that many employers aren't planning ahead. Do you have recommendations, second part, for networking now that many in-person interactions will be limited? So the first thing is, how far in advance should we be searching?
Okay, so as early as possible. So this is something that I held myself back from. So the job process, as we discussed, it's not one action you take. It's not just sending out a resume and you're done. It's doing your homework, right? The literature search, the testing, the data gathering, the analyzing. So you should start as soon as possible because you need to do the literature search, for example, which a lot of us fail to do. We did not actually look at the job market at all for us. You need to do that as early as possible so you can figure out what are you lacking, who do you need to talk to, what skills do you need to build, right? So early as possible, today, start, right? And it's not that hard. You don't have to start applying for jobs just because you're looking, but you need to start looking now so you know what you're looking for, right? And you know what you're missing. So for example, I started applying my 3rd year, but I didn't do it right. I just sent out resumes in my 3rd year. You need to be looking at where are you a good fit, especially right now, since people may be on hiring freezes, they might have low budgets, they're not planning to expand their teams, they don't want to hire people yet. But now's a good time to figure out, well, who are the employers I want to go for? What are their missions? What are their problems? Where can I become more impactful as I'm waiting for these types of organizations to resume hiring, right? That actually goes hand in hand with networking. People are now working from home. It means they have opportunities to grab a chat with you on Zoom or on the phone in the middle of the workday, potentially, right? So you should all be taking advantage of that fact. Reach out to more people. Go to them to learn about what they do. We kind of talked about a lot of frameworks here where we have no answers yet. So networking is the answer to get those responses from people who are actually in those positions. Even if they're not hiring, they might be more than happy to tell you about how their team works, what challenges they're dealing with, right? And then you can start filling in some of those blanks for yourself. Oh, Rashni, you're muted.
Yeah.
There you go.
One last question is, many people from industry recommend that PhDs should do some management courses. And you had mentioned earlier, do it if you think it makes sense. Is it helpful doing these management courses? How do we go about doing that? Is someone
Sure. So again, management is one of those, if we had to separate them into technical skill or sort of more soft skill, definitely falls in the soft skills. Management is about understanding the frameworks under which a problem or a product is done. So that's a little bit technical. That'll be different for every industry, right? If you're a medical device company, if you're a textbook publishing company, right? All of their specific frameworks are different. I would say education on those things are worth it because you want to understand how things work, right? Again, as a researcher, how does it work? If you understand how it works, you'll see places where they'll have problems, and usually where problems happen is where jobs appear, right? On the other side, in terms of management experience, again, like if you're looking for a project management or program management type of position, courses are going to be limited, right? You're going to be learning more book knowledge. That does not help you acquire more soft skills, right? Actual experience dealing with difficult people, figuring out why things don't move forward, why things are delayed, how you can help that, right? So there's a technical aspect to management, and there's also the experiential part of management. Courses would be great if you identify that you lack context in understanding the framework of management. That's fine. Do not assume that taking a management course is going to help you become more qualified in actually managing people. For that, you need to go out and do those things that will help you learn. People are actually really annoying sometimes, right? Like they're very hard to convince. They're very hard to motivate. You know, they don't get along with each other. They don't communicate very well. How do you deal with that? That is the experiential part of management that people really like to see evidence of from you if you're going to be applying for a management level position. So take the course for the right reasons. Do other things to fill in the gaps that a course cannot fill. Hopefully that was clear.
Thanks, Vay. Thanks so much for your time, for your expertise. It was fantastic that you went straight to the point, really got the point across as well, and for your insightful wisdom when you were asking these questions. You have 1 minute to probably get ready for your next call. So thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you, everyone. I had a really great time. I hope that you will stay in touch. You know, certainly you can reach out to me on LinkedIn and, you know, reach out to other people, poke them, you know, ask them respectfully for their advice, for their, you know, if you don't know someone, the best way to encourage them to reach out back to you is to show that you want to learn from them, right? I don't care if you actually want you know, your real reason is you want feedback on your resume or, you know, you want a referral for a job. It's weird when someone reaches out and you don't know them and they ask for something from you, right? So come at them with a humble attitude of wanting to learn from them. And then as you're talking, if it seems like you are a great fit for their team, believe me, people want to work with good people. So it's an opportunity for yourself to get in front of someone, to learn from them, and then maybe also at the same time, accomplish your goals, right? Which is to show that you're really interested and invested in what they do, and then that you want to join them in that mission, right? You want to add value to what they do. And if you come with that attitude, you will be much more successful in everything that you're trying to accomplish for yourself.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming.
All right. Thanks everyone. Have a great day.